Well, thanks for inviting me along to speak tonight. One of the things I've been interested in since I did history and archaeology at Glasgow, and I've always been interested in the dating of things and how we can use different like radiocarbon dating and what have you and all that sort of stuff. And I was always wondered if we could use place names to do that sort of thing. And I'm going to use a place which I know well, the Carse of Stirling, but I stay in Mentoring Clip Manager, and it's on the Carse of Stirling as well. And I want to explore how we could use the different languages that would make up the place names in this area, and see if we can get an idea of when settlements happened, but also when the peat clearance happened, because there's a persistent belief that the Carse of Stirling was covered in a bog going all the way from Gartmore near Lake of Menteith in the west, all the way through to Bo'ness in the east. And the thought is that there's only certain little places that you could cross. And that seemed to be part of the perception, certainly by English and later British invaders as they came up through from Edward the First to Jacobites, and they tried to find little ways through it. But this whole place was never ever a complete bog going from Gartmore to Bo'ness. And we'll see as we go on the place names that will help us to understand that. Now, this first slide is from General Roy's map of about 1750, and you can see in front of you here. So you've got the Kincardine moss. This is now the Blair Drummond moss, which Blair Drummond would be roughly where it says place names and in the title there. But it was cleared in the late 1700s, and we'll have a look at how this all affects the place names as we come along. Now, so just to get you an idea, if you have that in your head, that map in your head, because we'll be looking at a more modern map later on, and that will tell us what we cleared, and we'll look at the place names that are in there as well. So this is the Carse of Stirling, basically that whole green area that goes from Lake of Menteith right through to Falkirk. Stirling right in the middle. And I'm going to be talking mostly about Kincardine parish, the area between Airth and Falkirk, and also the area basically between the Wallace Monument and Alloa, which is also very important, but never seems to get any recognition from any history books and stuff. So this is the Carse. This is how we ended up with the Carse. It's a product of the last ice age. So when the ice melted, the sea rushed in, but because the ice was so heavy, the land started to rebound. So once we get into the Neolithic period, the Mesolithic, Neolithic period, the land, the sea has gone, and this is we start to get peat accumulation and all the rest of it, and that's what we end up with. The red dots here are where I found whales. Just to get your bearings, if you want it, that's Stirling there, the Rock of Stirling, the Wallace Monument here, near Lake of Menteith, away to the west here. Now, this talk all came about because of a chapter I've written in a book dedicated to Simon Taylor, who's the great place name scholar of our age. And we've got a festive coming out for him. Now, the festive was supposed to come out in 2020 for his 70th birthday. He was 75 last week, and it's still not out. So I don't know why. But I think COVID has had a massive effect on it and what have you. But this is basically the map from that book, and it's got all the place names that will be discussed in the book, except one, which is round about where you see Candy at the very bottom. There's a place name just there. And the reason it's not in the book is because I forgot all about it. Okay? And sometimes that happens with place name scholars. We're not all perfect. So it's got various aspects of places in there. Now, this is a typical Carse scene, looking from about 100 yards south of my home in Mentre, and it's looking out. You can see Stirling Castle and Royal Monument. In the middle ground is a bunch of trees. Just beyond that is the River Forth. And you could, if it wasn't for the River Forth, you could walk from here right through to there, and it would be so flat. And then that, and as flat as that in Menteith, on the other side of the Wallace Monument, it's as flat as that as well. And part of the reason I came to write the chapter in the book was because of two pieces of work. One is in this book, which is a popular geology of Scotland, a very good book, and it has little case studies all the way through it. And one of them is on the Carse of Stirling and how it was formed. And it talks about a little bit about the peat clearance that happens in the 18th century. And it says, the first extensive clearance of peat was initiated by Lord Keynes in 1767. He leased out land on condition that the tenant, the so-called moss laird, cleared the peat. And this is part of this whole belief that the peat wasn't cleared until that period. And it's not just in popular works such as that, also prominent academics such as T.C. Smout also had a say in that. And he's got this bit here: reclamation of mossland was not itself new as early as 1724. So we've got two dates which are kind of not helping matters here. It was observed that parts of Flanders moss by casting, paring and burning had in some cases been cut quite thorough and made arable ground. So again, T.C. Smout is perpetuating this belief that the Carse of Stirling was a peat bog all the way through, and it just started getting cleared in the late 18th century. But the place names themselves do not bear that out. The place names themselves go all the way back to the Brittonic period, into the Gaelic period, and into early Scots. And that's what we're going to look at in here. Now, there are 6 main languages that make up the place names of Scotland. And I'll show some examples in the next slide. But for our purposes, we're going to be looking at Pictish and British, Gaelic and Scots, and that's why I've got dates beside them. We're not going to look at Old English or Norse because they don't directly affect what we're doing here. There is Old English in Lothian, and there are Norse place names dotted about. There's Busby in Glasgow, for example. There's Wetherby and Humby in Fife, and there are little hogback type monuments, Logikirk near Stirling, and also at Tillicoultry and at Tullyallen near Kincardine. So the potential for North is there, but there are actually no North place names in the area. So I'll put Pictish and British because this is a very much a border zone. The Forth, certainly British up to the Forth, and we normally say Pictish north of the Forth, but that area of Menteith between Aberfoyle, Callander, Stirling, we could be talking, we think it's still British because there's Lanark place names there. We don't get Lanark place names above this. So there's a debate to whether we should be saying British or Pictish, but I think we're probably looking at a border zone where, a bit like the Netherlands and Flanders, where in Flanders it's called Flemish, and the Netherlands, the same language is called Dutch. And so it may be something like that we're talking about here. So anyway, whatever the case, British and British have gone from here by about 900 AD, that is. And Gaelic probably coming in from about 700, 750, and it lasts up to about 1200, maybe into about 1300, but certainly by the other side of the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, the Gaelic from here, this area is mostly gone. But the area around Stirling, Alloa, Falkirk, Gaelic has gone by that point. And then we get Scots coming in, probably by way of the borough of Stirling. It's founded in 1124. Cambus-Kenneth is founded in 1140. There's other monasteries get lands. Holyrood gets lands at Airth in 1127. and all these sort of things. So there's there's all this evidence for showing the rise and fall of languages, and we can see that with the place names as well. And these languages are not equally represented all over the country, either in space or time. So you will get some Gaelic in Lothian, but not to the same extent as you would in, say, Highland Perthshire. You'll get some Old English. You'll get Old English mainly in Berwickshire and Selkirkshire and what have you, but you can still get some over in Ayrshire. Maybole and Prestwick, for example, are Old English place names. So there's different areas have different densities of different languages as we go through. And just to give you some examples of some of these languages that some of you will have heard of or be aware of, British and Pictish, you've got Perth. Also, Partick is a Perth name. Dollar, Kincardine, all the Aber names. So if you think of Aberdeen, Aberdour, Aberfeldy, Abernethy, and then you go down to Wales, and you've got Aberystwyth and Abergavenny, places like that. So that's a key indicator of how we think that, or why we think that Pictish and British would have turned out to be Welsh. If we were speaking that language in these areas today, we would be speaking Welsh. And then Gaelic, Auchinleck, Cumbernauld, Balmaha looked like a Bala name, but it's actually a Bealach name. So it can just show these anglicised names can throw you into what thing, different meanings and what you think they should be. And then got North, Busby near Glasgow, as I said, and Dornoway, and all that way down the west coast and Orkney and Shetland are all full of North names. Old English, mostly in the east, where you've got Goldingham, Haddington, for example, but also, as I say, Maybole, Prestwick, and the Swinton of Dalswinton in Dumfriesshire. And then the Scots got done in England, Anniesland, Jordan Hill, Brindhill, Bishop Brigton, all these kind of places. And we'll meet more of those as we go on. Got a smattering of prehistoric, often called pre-Celtic names, mainly river names like the Spain, the Tay. Sometimes they take the form of goddesses, sometimes the slow flowing one or something like that. And then there's some French and Latin, Chapel-in-the-Row, for example, near Hamilton. Can't date to before 1543 because that's when the Earl of Arran, I think it was, or the Earl of Hamilton, can't remember, he became the Duke of Chapel-in-the-Row for the services to the French king. So that's just a small sample of what the place names showing up the languages. We're the most linguistically diverse nation in Europe for the languages of our place names. Most other countries have three. Ireland only has maybe three. England has four, but we've got six. So we can use that for dating purposes. That dating won't be exact, so we won't be able to say, oh, this place name was founded on what have you. We're talking about centuries worth of dating, sort of thing. And this map shows the different overlay of different languages that make up the place names. And the area we're going to be looking at is in this area here, just between Area 5 and Area 9. And you can see you've got Cumbric Gaelic. Cumbric just another word for British or Old Welsh or what have you. And then in Area 9 we've got Pictish, Gaelic and Scots and different languages in other parts of the country. So I'm going to start off with looking at Kincardine Parish, which is basically that area to the west of Stirling. It includes Blair Drummond, the safari park. For those of you who don't really know where I'm talking about. And it has different, you can see the three languages in here as we go through it. But you'll remember from the first map, the first slide, the map, Roy's map, you'll see Kincardine Moss, which was in here. Now this map is based on the Ordnance Survey first edition map, and it hasn't changed really since that map was produced. And all that boss had been cleared by that point. So the first edition Ordnance Survey map, 1862 in this area, and all that peat bog had been cleared by these moss layers. And we've got these little roads going all the way through it. Now these little roads make up the youngest names on the Carse. So you've got places like Kirk Lane, Summit Lane, Robertson's Lane, Naylor's Lane, and all these lanes, the settlements all go along these lanes, and they leave the fields for farming, as it were. As it were. Now, we're talking about an English lane, a Scottish standard English lane, meaning a narrow way between hedges, a byway. Not to be confused with a Scots loan, which is a cattle track through arable land. It originates as a cattle track through arable land. It later becomes a byway, really, I suppose. So these are the youngest names, not the oldest names that we might suppose from T.C. Smout or that geology book I was showing earlier. But we do have other names. We have British name, the Carden of Kincardine. We're thinking it used to be thought that Carden names were a copse, a small woodland, but we now think it's more of a word to do with enclosure or fort, and it could be a broch at Caldoch, which is just about 2 miles to the southwest of the old kirk of Kincardine. But it could be the fort at Doon or even the Roman fort at Doon, which is only another couple of miles to the north. Then we've got Gaelic, the Cambestrene. Bad is probably Scots Gaelic bata, meaning a boat, and we get little lots of the maps show little ferry boats going back and forward here before the bridge was built at Drip in the 1780s, I think it was. And then we've got Octatire, which paradoxically is the second lowest place in Menteith. So why is it the upper land? Because it's sits next to the River Teith, and the River Teith at one point had cut through at least 3 levels. So there's 3 levels of embankment going up, and Octatire sits in the top of it, sits in the upper one. Now, you'll notice the dates. You have a look at, if we go back to Scots to see Drip, debatable land is 1304. That would suggest that Drip is earlier than Cambestrene, but that's not the case. It's just when it first comes on record. And if we go through the thing from British to Gaelic to Scots, Octatire must be older than Drip. So we're looking at the dates, I have to stress, are not when the place was founded, it's just when it first comes on record in the documentation that we use. Now, Drip is the same name as the Drip in near Cathcart, or Clapton, and means debatable land, disputed land, and it's on the border. I have to get my fingers out to do this one. It's on the border between the earldom of Strathearn, the Soke of Stirling, and the earldom of Menteith, the diocese of Dunblane, Dunkeld, and St Andrews, and the parish of Kincardine, Stirling, and Lecropt. So you can see why it would be debatable. And then we've got other names like Westwood and Chalmerston. We've got a James Chalmers, who's the clerk at King Chapel of Stirling in 1454. Now, further to the east, we're going to be looking at this area from Carse up here, Earth, down to Grangemouth, down into this area, but mostly the area in the middle between where Bell Dyke and what have you. So this is John Reid's map, and John Reid was one of my favourite scholars of this area. He was one of the stalwarts of the Falkirk Locus History Society, and he's written quite a lot of this area in the Journal Calatria. But I've also got stuff by John Harrison, who's a Stirling historian, and Richard Tipping, who have all done kind of work on the field at Bannockburn and the area to the west of Kincardine into Menteith. And they also come up with this idea that there wasn't a bog going from one end to the other. It was interspersed with lots of settlements. And you can see here the remains of the peat bogs in yellow. These are the modern ones in yellow. And you can see all the different place names in red. We've got Celtic place names, to read the British and Gaelic place names, and Scots are in the blue dots. So if we have a look at that area, we've got a battle mentioned in 711 in the Irish Annals and in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. These are I think it depicts in the Anglo-Saxons that were fighting, and they're not fighting over a bog. They're fighting over rich arable farmland. So that's one thing that's another reason why we shouldn't imagine as a whole a bog going all the way through from Lake Menteith to Bo'ness. And then we've got to think the earliest name for a Carse sack, comes to record in 1140, but it might have a British underlying element, coarse, meaning reeds, rushes, sedge, generally used in marshland vegetation and by metonymy of marshes and swamps. And then we've got Candy. Again, it's late on record, 1685, so that doesn't mean it's bounded then, just when it comes on record. With a specific perhaps meaning, it probably means a boundary, and it's sat on the edge of the fort, under what is now the petrochemical project, or soon to be the petrochemical complex at Grangemouth. And then we've got Doll, north and south Doll, and the current west, and I'll show a really good Doll in a couple of slides. And then we've got Gaelic. So these are British names going further up, but Gaelic coming down. We've got Carse. It's a place based on that Carsack name. And then we've got Boskenna, which we've probably got British Boss, meaning a hut or a church, plus an Irish saint name. And the thing about the Boss, it's found in other place names throughout that whole central belt. So Baldernock, Balthron, and we'll see in a minute, Tullabuddy, named Clipmanager, are all Boss named all, and they're all the sites of early churches. And Boskenna is one of 4 churches on or near the karst, or very near the karst. And you don't have a church unless there's a population to support it. They've got things like Auchentyre, a really good example of a anglicised Gaelic name. Cold kitchen, nothing to do with cookery, just common grazing. There's a kitchen, meaning common grazing. Then we've got a cluster of gal names, mostly along the River Callan, and a dal is a wettle meadow or hawk, which sometimes often flooded. Can be quite precarious, but they're very fertile parts of arable land, and so they kind of build out from there to take them back to the karst and all that. And then early Scots, we've got Grange, which is a monastic farm. That's what it means. Earlier called Abbot Grange, on land given to Holyrood Abbey around about 1140. And Holyrood and Cambus Kenneth and Newbattle Abbey get quite extensive patches of land here from about the 1140s. And they're not doing it by running out the karst, taking away the peat. They're taking over land that's already been farmed and settled. So this is the one that I had forgotten about in my article that I'm writing, called Blank Land. And you've got a salinam, which is a salt pan of Blank Land. And Professor Jeff Barrow thinks that the salt pan in Calendar is the same as this salt pan of Blank Land. And it's interesting that near Candy here, which is the British place name, we've got 2 Scots place names, Panstead and Saltcoats. So they've been panning for salt in this area, and they've built up a settlement, and they would have used the peat, presumably, or maybe even coal from nearby to heat up the water from to make the salt. So that means that this Blank Land is the earliest Scots name in the record. So this means that Gaelic is now at its peak in this area. It starts to then die off, and Scots becomes more prevalent as a naming language. So by 1348, in the Chequer Rolls, we start to see, on the other side of the fort, round about Clipmannon, we start to see small Scots place names like Grasmainton, Meadow End, and Shield Hill, which all come record about 1348. So that means that Gaelic, at least in the lowland part of the Clackmannanshire and East Stirlingshire, had probably gone. So we can now say that Gaelic, I use Gaelic as a dating language from about 750 through to about 1200. And after that, we start to see Scott taking up more of the place names. So, but this area, but we're going to go much further back now, but this area contains a load of place names which I find very interesting. And here we have basically what I've called the Bannockburn Carse, which contains the largest concentration of British place names on the Carse. And it may have, I still have to check, but it may contain the largest concentration within a small area of British place names in Scotland. So this shows that this area was cleared by 900, probably even before that, probably by 800, because Gaelic would have started to become a naming language by then. So we've got places like Logie, with Logie Kirk, again, probably a British or pictured name that come to mean an early church, and Professor Tommy Clancy has dated these things to roughly about 650 to 850. We've got Tullibody, but not actually on the Carse, it's about 30 metres up above it, but it had a substantial proportion of its land on the Carse. And it's strictly a Gaelic-speaking name, but it's got a British element, Bodwin or Bodvan, but the first element being Bod, but we were getting that Bodkenner or Baldernick and what have you. That often with ecclesiastical connotations. And most of these Bod names are indeed very early churches. Mentry, where I come from, it's exactly what it says in the tin. It's a farm or settlement associated with a plain or open land. Goga, the bend in the river, which sits right beside the bend. The River Devon comes from Crooked Devon right through to here to Goga. It goes on an east to west basis, and then at Goga it goes north to south. And then we've got Doll. This is the place with Dollage. You can see the Doll here in the flood in February 2020. And you can see the hill here is the Maya, another British place name of a British tribe, the Mayaty. Another one at Maya Hill near Denny. And I often wonder if the people who owned this hill, ran this hill, often were the ones who helped settle the Carse down in here and during the British speaking period. Whatever the case, it was still the case that this distillery here used to be the Doll Distillery, and it was one of the oldest legal distilleries in Scotland, and they would have taken all the grain and barley from this area to make whiskey. So we can keep going back to British place names. We've got Mana and Powys. Now Powys could be a Gaelic form, and it comes into Scots as Pow or Poo sometimes. It means a burn flowing sluggishly through castland, often having deep peaty pools with crumbling overhanging bank. As I say, it could be Gaelic, but if you look at the next one, Paul Mays, it has the same element that's in Mentry, Mise, meaning a plain burn. So probably that Powys originally is a British place name. And then we've got a smattering of Gaelic, so we've got Risk, which I'll come to in a minute. Then we've got Skeoch, which is Hawthorne, and we've got the Peteria of Skeoch, a peat bog of Skeoch, comes onto record in 1317, and this later becomes a huge barony in the Middle Ages round about this era. A huge sort of agricultural income for the crown, but most particularly for the Queen. The Queen of Scots gets all this land on either side of Stirling from Demaya all the way around to sort of Cowie as part of the dowry or part of the wedding present, I suppose it is, all the way from whoever married James II right up to Mary Queen of Scots and beyond. And that was their main sort of personal income. And then we've got Conton, which is the other Scots name in the Stirling area, and there's no real Gaelic place names about it. So it seems that area was cleared probably around about 1200. Now here's the west, which is up here. So I've just put this bigger map in. So you've got Stirling to the west there, and Earth to the east, with the peat bog. You can see the dark patches of peat bog still there. And if we zoom in, we've got Risk and Over Risk. And Risk is a anglicisation of Gaelic Risk, meaning a moor, a fen, a marsh, a peat bog. But when you look even closer in here, you can see Scots. You've got Moss Side, Moss Nook, and Moss Laird. So we've got an undocumented activity of moss lairds in here, just like we had Blair Drummond. And this map also shows the longevity of settlement going from Brittonic to Scott. So we've got Paul Mays up here, Risk, as I say, but we've also got a Balgooney, the Smithstown here, as well as Drypow and Dykes, which are all got. So this area has been worked upon for over 1500, 1700 years or what have you. So why would you go through all that effort to clear a few thousand years of peat, some come about 4 to 5 meters deep, in the pre-modern agricultural society? Land was the basis of wealth. So this area, at this slide on the left-hand side, is the Flanders Moss. And you can see it's a kind of wild, unkempt area. And the farm on the immediately to the east of it is Little Ward Farm, where the peat had been cleared. And you can see the rich agricultural soil that's underneath that peat. And if you go, this is the road coming off the Clipmanager Bridge, just to the southeast of Clipmanham. The distance between that fence post and the mile and Hurl in the country is about 8 kilometres. And potentially you could have walked through 8 kilometres of corn just because they've cleared all the peat from and what the Carse. So a good carable farmland with a prize that made you richer still. So just to conclude, I'm saying that the earliest phase of peat clearance and settlement is on this area between basically Bannockburn and Tullabuddy and Bentley and the Wallace Monument. But before 900, then you've got the area between Carse and Grangemouth, perhaps starting in the British speaking period and intensified after 900. And then in Kincardine Parish, you've got Gaelic and Irish Scots along the rivers. And they were using the peat as a kind of chilling ground. There's a map from 1754 which shows that they were using this area here as a chilling ground. All these little settlements along the river here were using this area as a chilling ground. But it was cleared in the 1760s, 1780s, and now can hold the earlier place names. And so this is the latest phase of peat clearance, not the earliest. Bit of that further reading. And thank you very much.